Hello again, everyone. I'd like to introduce Ian Cranshaw from the CIA. He's head of international trade, and he's going to give us a perspective on Brexit for our industry. Brexit is coming, so it's important to listen carefully to what Ian has to say. And we'll hopefully have time for a few questions when he's finished. So over to you, Ian.
Yeah, thanks very much, Philip, and good morning, everybody. As Philip said, I'm head of international trade at the Chemical Industry Association, but I also am operations manager over at Chemicals Northwest. So it's lovely to be invited. No hard feelings. Happy to speak to a Northeast audience, although I know that there are many signed in from outside of the region. So it's great to be talking to a key industry cluster. I know that a number of you related to the process industries, but maybe not directly involved in chemicals. So maybe I should just introduce the chemical sector just with some brief statistics, just to hopefully set the scene. So annual gross value added from the sector, in excess of £15 billion, turnover of over £50 billion a year. So a significant industry without question. Employment of 140,000 in direct employment, and many more in associated and support industries. So really, really critical. And I think it's really important in the manufacturing sector is salaries are also 30% above the national average for the manufacturing industry. So well played, great career job, really important to downstream industries. The other thing about chemicals is you'll pretty much find them in 95% of manufactured goods. So even if you're not a chemical producing company, you'll be using them somewhere in your processes. So absolutely critical. Where do we fit into the grand scheme of things? The 11th largest chemical industry in the world, 4th largest in Europe, really, really important. Integral, if not completely intertwined with the European industry, which is why Brexit has been so relevant to us. As Philip said, really, really happy to take any questions. If I can't answer them here today, I'll absolutely take them away and get you a response, whether you want that, to the entire audience or on one-to-one. Very happy to do either. So what I need to do now is just to quickly share my screen and then we'll be good to go. I'm going to go full screen on the presentation, so I'm afraid you won't see me. Well, you'll be delighted not to be able to see me for the next 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, I hope that's now completely visible to you all. So welcome again. So I was asked to talk about Brexit and the importance and the relevance to the chemical industry today. So here we are, November the 11th, a very important day, of course, for everybody in remembering those who've sacrificed. And during COVID, there's a huge number of others who are still sacrificing. So grateful to everyone's contribution. But 51 days to go until the end of the year. What do we mean by end of the year? That's the end of the transition period. So needless to say, negotiations are intensifying. It's a great government phrase. Goodness me, what have they been doing for the last 4.5 years if they've not been in intensive negotiations? Let's do this deal. What our industry has been asking for is don't do the deal on the 31st of December. You really need to do the deal. Well, should have been done some time ago, but let's do the deal quickly. Companies, industries are not quite ready yet. That's borne out by pretty much every assessment of sector groups, industry groups, trade associations. When we ask our members, do you have all of the information available? The answer comes back quite clearly that they don't have all of that information. So as an industry group, back in the good old days of April, May 2016, we went out to our membership and asked, for their view on the Brexit referendum, whether they saw opportunities outside of the EU. And I'm sure some of them did. But taking the package as a whole, not a single member company said that they would prefer to be outside of the EU. Having said that, of course, as an industry body and as representatives of our membership, we immediately accepted that the vote had taken place and we needed to move quickly to a position that respected that referendum. The terms of the referendum were clear. We will respect the public's view from the perspective of government. So What we thought it was responsible to do, though, was to lay out and explain to government with some detail what our red lines were. And we're not in a position to impose red lines on government, but these were the absolutely fundamentals that the industry was looking for from any negotiated agreement. So zero tariffs, of course. We're a massively exporting industry. 60% of our exports go to the EU. 75% of raw materials that we use come from the EU. So we don't want to start paying tariffs on those fundamental imports and exports. It would be incredibly damaging to the sector. Of course, we're used to roll on, roll off exporting, trade with the EU, minimal documentation, a single market genuinely in all areas. So we don't want to see unnecessary customs and border delays. Regulatory continuity, this is where we get into the detail. Many of you will know of the REACH regulations, possibly the largest pit of legislation ever delivered by the European Union. It's taken 12 or 13 years of significant investment to get where we are. We have the largest dossier of information globally of chemicals that are in use. And we don't just want to walk away from that. And access to skilled labour, many areas of work that the companies deliver, we just don't have the full skill set in the UK. So companies are bringing in their operatives from the EU regularly, and they make a massive contribution. So we do need that access to the skilled and contract labour that's available on the continent. So absolutely important. Access to some of the information, also really, really important. What I could have started by talking about is how we got to where we are. So we've mentioned 51 days to go. Can you believe it's less than a year ago since the December election? The government came in with an 80-seat majority. There was confidence that, having broken, if not dismantled, the red wall that existed in the northeast with seats such as Redcar, Sedgefield, Middlesbrough South, Blythe, Darlington, all moving conservative. There was a real enthusiasm, certainly from government, that the levelling up agenda had to be delivered. And we were very keen to see what that meant in reality, what that meant for our industry. So we've certainly been engaging with government throughout. I did pick up on some of Colin's previous comments. The last speaker, he talked about actually levelling up from his perspective is real, that funding still seems to be available, that government will continue to fund some of the key investments necessary to support industrial development. And we haven't even mentioned the industrial strategy, but again, some of the key deliverables from the industrial strategy, many of those investments are required in the northeast. Because let's go back again to some of the assessments of Brexit and the regional impacts. One thing that we understood very clearly from an early stage was the northeast was listed as the region most likely to be negatively impacted by Brexit. So I think for this region, we need to make sure, and we're doing everything we can to deliver what you need as businesses, and is most important. But then of course COVID hit. Sorry, going back to the government timetable, and things changed. So the planned reduction in corporation tax from 19% to 17% was cancelled. Business rate review, that we've been asking for a business rate review for a good number of years. We believe that it was on the agenda. It was genuinely being considered, but things aren't being addressed as quickly as we would like. So we will revert to that. Before the end of the year, at every opportunity with government. It's something that all businesses need. So it's something that we need to work out. On government debt, I think we all hear the numbers on the news every day. The fact that the government spent just between April and September £208 million. That's and in 1 month in April, they spent more than in the whole of 2019. So significant levels of debt. And that all relates to, what funding is available post-COVID. And of course, we've had fantastic news this year. Everyone's putting a slight dampener on it, saying, look, we're not quite there yet. But, when we do emerge from COVID and the impact, then we need to get back to business as quickly as possible, and we need to make sure that some of the commitments, some of the promises made to investing in the north, into the northeast, will be delivered. You know, the one saving grace almost of all of that debt that's been built up. Of course, it all has to be repaid at some stage. You know, but with 0.1% interest rates, the actual cost of the UK servicing that debt at the moment is less than in 2019. So I'm not saying it's a blank check to continue to write money, but it does give the government some flexibility, if you like, to do what it needs to do. Here's a timetable as far as some of the Brexit negotiations and the key dates that we have in mind. You know, the fact that we did leave the EU back on the 31st of January is well known. We were promised an oven-ready deal. The deal was about the withdrawal agreement. You'll appreciate that what's being negotiated at the moment is the future UK-EU trade relationship. So absolutely there's a differential there, but do recognise that we left the EU as long ago as the 31st of January, and what a different world it was back then. Both sides, you know, and it was helpful that they published their negotiating mandates, their clear objectives for what they're looking for out of the relationship. Of course, there was always going to be a split as to... I'm making hand gestures. Sorry, I know that you can't see me at the moment. You're just looking at these rather formal slides, but forgive me. But both sides know pretty much what each other is looking for, and then the start of formal negotiations on the 2nd of March. Both sides flexing their muscles a little, both sides saying these negotiations, discussions aren't going in the right direction. We're not making as much progress as we need. But again, there's a lot of brinksmanship, there's a lot of muscles being flexed, and of course both sides have to be responsive and understand what their electorate are expecting them to deliver. So there's been some toing and froing, ups and downs, every metaphor that you might want to choose, but we are where we are now. We're in the tunnel, as they say, as they like to say in negotiations, and this is where those negotiations are being intensified. We did have and I'll come on to some of our influencing and how we've been working with key stakeholders. But, you know, even our very as recently as yesterday, we had a session with a Bayes minister. You know, there's some confidence, there's hope. You know, government have always said there's hope, but there's confidence that a deal might be agreed at some stage in November. You know, I think the timetable we're looking at is by November the 15th, which is Sunday. So if we see white smoke coming out of the the chimneys in Whitehall, then we might see that there will be a deal, because you need to agree something in the middle of November for it then to be cleared by the European Parliament by the 26th of November. And then, of course, it has to be ratified by the sovereign parliaments, including our own. So it will need to come to the House for a debate and for a vote at the end of the day before we formally exit the transition period on the 31st of December. So that just puts into perspective some of the hard deadlines that do exist. You know, but what I would admit to, I've presented on Brexit for the last 4 years, and the number of times that I've said that this is the absolute deadline, we must deliver some agreement by X date, and of course I've been seen to be a little foolish, because the can has been kicked down the road for 4 years as we've better understood where we want to be as a nation. You know, the flexibility that the EU has. You know, there's lots of accusations that Barnier has been less than flexible in his position, but you know, that was the agreed position from the EU negotiating mandate back in February. So they were very clear where they wanted to be, but there was always going to be a shift required, flexibility on both sides, and I'd like to think that we're going to achieve that in the next week or so. I've mentioned that I would try and touch on some of the engagement and influencing. So, of course, David Frost is the UK's lead negotiator, working directly to the Prime Minister. Michel Barnier in Brussels, working to the Parliament. And again, it's not as if we can only communicate with David Frost, but we've also communicated with the European negotiator, but also through CEFIC. You know, we've got a fantastic relationship. We're a member of the European Chemicals Agency, so trade association. So of course we do work, and actually as an industry, the EU 28 as was, has spoken with a single voice from the outset. So those red lines, those negotiating requirements, preferences, have been agreed across Europe. So as an industry, that's what this industry needs, because we're not an industry in isolation. We've got huge competition from the Middle East, from China, from the US, with the benefits of low-cost energy and shale gas. So we need to protect in a way without being protectionist. We need to retain competitiveness within the European industry, and that's what we're trying to achieve. So within UK Parliament, my colleagues at CIA, Steve Elliott, Simon Marsh, working with various groups across the House, in the House of Lords, in the House of Commons, working with the all-party parliamentary groups. We've continued to advise and seek advice and influence from the people who genuinely understand how fundamental the chemical industry is to the UK economy. So I think we've made real strides in advising parliamentarians and those in the House of Lords, just how important the industry is. We use the phrase the industry of industries, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about the fact that 95% of manufactured goods contain chemicals. So it's absolutely critical that that's all fully understood, and it is now. I think we also say that our industry has never had a better profile, but also never been better understood within government as it is now. Some of those critical national infrastructures within our industry, some of the key supplier industries, the utility industries that we supply into, whether it be into the water sector, the natural gas sector, our products do all of those things. So absolutely critical that we continue to operate. And we did get great cooperation at the start of COVID from government, the letter from Alok Sharma, the business secretary, mandating, advising that chemical employees were critical workers, that they should be encouraged to continue to work, and thanks massively to chemical companies for working so well with their workers, with their workforce, collaboratively with the unions to make sure that a safe COVID compliant workplace was deliverable for them. So it's been a great success story. And also the flexibility that those industries, our companies, showed, in switching production, in producing hand sanitizer, in producing PPE equipment for the NHS, for the care sector. It was a fantastic effort all round. So incredibly proud to be associated with many of our members. So again, we've been engaged with the Prime Minister, with the Commission President, again, at very senior levels. And we continue to meet with BEIS ministers, and they're at the November meeting with the Chemicals EU Exit Group, and that meeting was as recently as yesterday. So continuing to advise on company preparedness, but also, the fundamental must-haves, if you like, of any Brexit deal. Government has also created a trade advisory group specifically on the chemical sector, so we're delighted to be able to contribute into that. That's not specifically on Brexit, so I won't dwell on it, but it really is about our future trading agreements with other nations, and the key one being, of course, the United States. The US is still our single largest market for chemical exports, as well as pharmaceutical exports. So advising them, government, on what we would like to see negotiated in that FTA, again, is key. And an ambitious free trade agreement with the US market would be absolutely what not just our industry needs, but because we sell into every other facet of manufacturing, then everyone will benefit from better regulation. I will never say lower regulation. We're a heavily regulated industry, and rightly so. But lower tariffs and a quick reduction in those tariffs, which are effectively just a tax on business. So we don't want to see those in our trade with the US. Preparedness, and this goes back. I mean, we sit on CBI groups, we sit on various other industry groups. We hear the surveys, we appreciate even the government's reasonable worst case scenario document relating to Brexit preparedness suggested that as many as 50% of large companies and maybe 80% of SMEs are not fully prepared for the end of year transitions. And what I've tried to explain in the slide is that is transitions that will be required, changes to the way your business operates, deal or no deal. So during the transition period, we've operated as if we were still in the customs union, still in the single market. So companies have accepted that they've seen very little change. Come the 1st of January, with a deal or without, we will be outside of those arrangements. So, exporting, importing documentation will be required, no question. There will be potentially tariffs. Companies will have to look at all of their VAT responsibilities. All of these issues companies can prepare for now. And as CIA, we've certainly been advising our members to make sure that all of that preparation that can be done now, based on the current information, has actually been done. So I know that the numbers across various industries are mixed, but everyone would be advised to look at what they will need to do to continue to trade with the EU after the 1st of January. But again, working with government, there was a preparedness webinar that the business department ran on the 2nd of November. I know a number of you will have signed up and participated in that event. There were 1,500 on the call, and that was specific to the chemical sector. It wasn't a generic presentation. It was very much focused, contributions from HSE, DEFRA, as well as the business department. But if you were there, you will have learned something. But clearly government don't have all of the answers that industry is looking for at the moment. And these are the channels that we're working in at the moment, developing a risk register that I mentioned further down to better understand, okay, you've explained that, and there are some obvious areas of clear guidance to companies, but where's the nuances? Where's the falling between the cracks? And we've got a number of examples of where the information from government isn't sufficient. So we're working on our own business readiness brochure that should be available for circulation from the end of this week. So do try and make contact with me, come through Philip and the team, and I'll happily send you a copy of that brochure if anyone's interested. Maybe as soon as it's available, I'll actually ask NEPIC to include it in the information pack relating to this Meet the Member event. So very happy to do that. So just conclusion, I think I've probably spoken enough. A free trade agreement is absolutely critical. I mentioned those 60% exports, 75% of imports. It's absolutely critical that we get that and that we get it quickly. We don't want to be running all of this uncertainty into the last few days of December. It's not really going to work. If you would ask me, and maybe a question will come, will we get a deal? I think people are saying yes. Our nervousness is, and this is what the next bullet really touches on, we're likely to get a tariff-free deal with the EU by the end of the year, but will it contain all of the detail that we need to give the companies, to give our members, to give you the comfort, the certainty that you need that actually your operations with the EU will continue unaffected? And really, if you haven't dealt with rules of origin, if you haven't dealt with tariff suspensions, if you haven't dealt with trade remedies or trade defence instruments, then you will do soon, because we need all of that information to secure the preferential tariff rates. Any supposed free trade agreement suggests it will deliver. So if you don't comply with rules of origin, you won't actually get the preferential rate in your trade with the EU. So we need all of that detail. The same with REACH. One of our negotiating tactics is that we have an annex attached to the free trade agreement, but it's unlikely that annex will be finalised in time for year end. So again, that introduces uncertainty, and REACH UK will start from day one. So from January the 1st, there will be requirements on companies to comply with UK REACH. So we really do need that access to the EU data to avoid the unnecessary duplication of what's happened over the last 12, 13 years of the development of EU REACH. The cost implications of our not having access to that data are as much as £1 billion a year for the industry and for the industry's customers. And an awful lot of duplication that really doesn't add anything to the environment, might lead to duplication on testing, including animal testing. It's really avoidable, but it has to be negotiated. So we're continuing to push government for clarity in this area. I've mentioned already that the UK and the EU 27 chemical industries are very much aligned in this area. But what we also say to government is, and this is COVID related as much as it is Brexit related, while our industry has continued to operate throughout the COVID pandemic, many of our customer industries have suffered. So the aerospace sector, the automotive sectors. So what we're looking for is government to keep an eye and to work with us to understand and appreciate that we might face some 2021 challenges within the industry. So that's something to bear in mind as well. And we're making really good progress on that FTA with the United States. I'm not going to offer a political view as to whether it's easier now with a Biden administration ahead of a Trump administration. Clearly, Trump was incredibly supportive of a deal with the UK, as Boris Johnson is of one with the US. But I think Biden will be quite pragmatic. I think he will recognise the progress of USTR, that's the US trade representative, and the progress they've made in negotiating. So we're hopeful that real progress will not be ignored, but will be picked up and hopefully delivered by the middle of 2021. But we will see where the UK sits in the wider pecking orders of the new US administration. So I'll stop there. I'll stop sharing, which means I'll come back on screen. But thank you very much for your attention. I hope you learned something.
Thank you very much, Ian. That was really interesting. Good to get a general overview of how we've got here as well. And really pleasing that we have the CIA helping the government understand where we are and the importance of the chemical industry. So that bodes well for the future. So we've actually only got a couple of minutes for questions. So is there anything else that anyone would like to ask? We've got a couple of minutes. I think we're going to go to the next presentation at 12. So we've got a couple of minutes. Anything for Ian? This document you're going to send to us, Ian, I think that's very helpful, and that will be distributed once we get it. So I think you've been let off the hook lightly. I'm sure if you go to the VIP area, people will want to see you there, and I'm sure people will message you in the lobby, and maybe you can meet up with people in the lounge. So, but thanks for that insight, and thanks for coming along and joining our Meet the Members this year.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, Ian. Bye.
Bye-bye.